everybody, and welcome to another episode of RevOps Demos That Don't Suck. I am your host, Matt Volm, CEO and co-founder of RevOps Co-op. RevOps Co-op is a community of 8,500 plus folks from around the globe, all who are passionate about revenue operations. If you're not a member of our community already, definitely encourage you to join. We've got a Slack group, newsletter, events, in-person, digital, courses, education, you name it, we got it. But today, one of the things that we're doing is sitting down talking to one of our partners about a very interesting product that is super helpful and relevant to folks in revenue operations. So with me today, I've got Galib Suleiman, who is the CEO and co-founder of Polytomic, which is an anywhere ETL app. I know, and I've got tons of questions for you, Galib, because we've all heard these things about ETL, reverse ETL, all that stuff. And so Polytomic essentially helps folks in revenue operations connect disparate sources of data. And like I said, anywhere ETL. But rather than me explain what the product does, Galib, I'll turn it over to you. Anything you want to add to kind of the introduction there, either yourself or the product or solution before I start to kind of pepper you rapid fire with questions, my friend?
Sure. Let's just talk about the product itself and elaborate a bit. You know, when we say anywhere ETL, for those who've heard the term ETL, it involves moving data to a data warehouse. Those who've heard the term reverse ETL, it's the other way. Really, at a basic level, we move data between different systems and consolidate functionality that usually requires people to buy different products. So people will just buy us to replace multiple vendors and having to buy multiple vendors. The last bit I'll mention is the data syncing market is just so fragmented. If you want to move stuff into the data warehouse, what people call ETL, there's a pool of vendors that only does that. If you want to move from your data warehouse into your CRMs, for example, Salesforce, HubSpot, and so on, there's a pool of vendors that only does that. If you want to move data between SaaS tools like Stripe and HubSpot, for example, or Stripe and Salesforce, or Salesforce and Zendesk, there's a pool of vendors that only move data between SaaS tools. No warehouses, no databases. Lastly, there's a cottage industry of small companies that move data to and from spreadsheets. Well, we take care of that too. And then lastly, some people want live data from their product backend. They'll often use companies like Segment to pipe every user sign up into the CRM, into a lead or a contact. That's another use case we take care of. So when we say anywhere ETL, really, we're the app that will just move data without you having to think about buying 4 or 5 different products.
That's great. And I know having, myself been on the software development side, at least in starting companies and building products from the ground up, one of which was a heavy kind of data company. I always wondered, I was like, why do we need so many different vendors? Like, if you're moving data from point A to point B, like, why can't you also move it from point B back to point A? Like, why do you need an ETL provider and then a reverse ETL provider? If you can do one, why can't you do the other? It was always very confusing to me. But so, and actually on that note, Galib, not often do we kind of get to sit down with the CEO and co-founders of companies. So tell me, I guess, what was the origin story for Polytomic? Like, what was your background? What problems did you see out there that made you want to kind of dive into this area and, kind of build a solution?
So I've got over a decade of experience as a data and analytics person. And I used to run data teams at fast-growing startups where I would serve my RevOps counterpart with requests. And there were just 2 things that would keep coming up. One was I never had time to fulfill every request they had regarding data. In a company, data scattered, everyone wants access to it, especially the RevOps crowd. And when we did get to solving their problems, it's always involved buying multiple products, and that just drove me crazy. You know, every single product would come in, different legal terms, different pricing structure, different account manager, different documentation, and so on. And so I just got fed up, honestly. I had a giant budget to play with. We were, my last job before I started a company, we were huge budgets. I could just buy whatever I wanted, but it was just such an onerous situation. It just drove me crazy. My RevOps counterparts would just come to me and go, I just need data moved. that's where the conversation would stop for them. They didn't really care whether this was ETL, reverse ETL, are we going to the warehouse, from the warehouse? Well, I want to run a query on this data. Oh, sorry. Okay, I need to move it into the warehouse, which means I need to buy this vendor. I want this data in Salesforce coming from the product. Oh, okay, hang on. That's a different product I need to go buy to take care of your needs and so on. So I just went crazy with this stuff. And in the midst of a growing startup and so on, you just end up managing so many tools that there's a SaaS explosion now. So this is really a reaction to SaaS explosion. Now, underneath the hood, these are very difficult and very different technical problems, which is actually why the market is so fragmented. So we've just spent a lot of effort making that bit invisible. Who cares if there are different technical problems? You're a RevOps person, you want to move data, end of story.
Yep. Yeah, that's awesome. And so, so it sounds like, kind of you started the company, and some of the problems that folks out there might be having today that indicate there's a need for a potential solution like Polytomic are the need for data from disparate tools, disparate systems, the warehouse, spreadsheets, other SaaS applications, and the need to either get access to that data easily or just kind of move it around in a more, call it easy or streamlined sort of fashion, essentially not having that capability today. I know I experienced this at my last role too, having to go to the engineering team to kind of ask to have like data moved, right? And you're absolutely correct. Like I didn't necessarily care what the technical problem was, or the fact that technically one request might be different from the other. Like I just wanted things to wind up in the spot that I needed them, so I could do my job, right? I could do the analysis, I could help, serve my stakeholders, things like that. So it sounds like if folks in RevOps are kind of experiencing that, kind of disparate data spread all over the place, not being able to get things consolidated like they need, then that might indicate that there's a potential, kind of solution or need for a solution like Polytomic. And so before we kind of dive into the product and open that up, talk about who's typically a good fit for a solution like yours, right? So for folks who are RevOps, out there right now, are we talking big companies, mid-market, early stage startups, all of the above? Any specific, I don't know, like data maturity that people are coming from? Are they, more sophisticated, less sophisticated, certain tech stack, certain places where data exists? Like what's a good, who out there that might be watching is a good candidate for a tool?
Most of our customers tend to be, not exclusively, but they do tend to be SaaS companies. And the range is enormous. It's everything from 2 to 3 person companies who simply at the tiny end, all they want is a point and click solution that pipes every user sign up into Salesforce, for example, or HubSpot. And then it just goes all the way to enterprises with multiple thousands of employees. B2B SaaS, again, tends to be where the crowd that comes to us the most. It does tend to be some sort of RevOps person who's been handed a CRM, maybe a couple of other SaaS tools, and told, make it work, make our data needs work. We want a dashboard, for example, that covers data from all 3 systems, if there are just 3 systems in there. Well, you need to put that in a warehouse first, right? That's where we're going to come in. We need product data in these systems. We need product data in Zendesk for our customer support team, in Marketo or HubSpot for our marketing team. Well, this is the reverse ETL bit. So we're going to come in there. So it's actually a huge range. There really is no lower bound. And again, the lower bound, everyone wants their user signups in their CRM. That's what people tend to start with. And then it gets a lot more sophisticated, and people start wanting to gather data from different systems, dump it into Salesforce or in the warehouse or in spreadsheets. But it does very much tend to be a RevOps person rather than someone who's 2 or 3 degrees removed.
That's good. Yeah, why don't we if you can open up up the tool, kind of share your screen, and then maybe we can start with the you mentioned you were mentioning some kind of common use cases, whether it's at the integration level or even just some things that RevOps folks might solve for, where a kind of point and click solution like Polytomic could help.
Yep, sure thing. I'll share my screen and we'll walk through some use cases. We'll begin with the use case of, I've got the users in my product backend and I want to pipe them to Salesforce. Let's share my screen. Okay, so here's Polytomic's demo instance. And on this instance, we're connected to a number of integrations. But for this demo, we'll move data from a product backend database, this example here. And we'll throw in a Google Sheet that we're connected to as well. We'll move data from both into Salesforce as an example. Now, our very foundation for this use case is built on data models. Now, this sounds fancy. All a data model is a list of fields from your sources. And so the customer builds a catalog, which I will do in this blank canvas, of fields from their interesting sources. And then anyone can sync any fields from this catalog to other systems. For example, let's say we have some user data we'd like to surface from our product backend. Now we've already connected to it, so we can click Add Model, pick the source system. I'll go to this backend database here. Let's call this model User Details. And I get to point and click and browse the tables or collections on this backend database. If I want user data, I can click that, and we'll return all the fields behind the collection. This is from the customer's data. Every field has a name. You have an example value, so you can see the shape of your own data. But your leftmost column is the actionable one. This is a yes/no column that decides what fields are surfaced in a model and thus greenlit for syncing to other systems. So in this case, maybe I want all these user properties to be available for syncing. I'll select them all, click Save. And this is all a data model looks like. There's a name you've given it, a list of fields, an icon telling you where it's coming from. Now, some RevOps people are quite sophisticated and they know SQL. You can use SQL to generate these fields as well. I can click Add Model. We'll go to a separate database for good measure. And let's say we've got some billing info we'd like to surface. And here's where you can switch from table select mode to SQL query mode. Or to select that. And again, some of our customers have the complete works of Shakespeare in SQL form, but I'll keep things very silly and brief for the sake of time. A very basic query. And we'll go from there. And then it's the same workflow. Query produces fields, pick the fields you want to surface. Excuse me. In this case, I'll select everything. Now, optionally, you also get to join these data models to one another. This is just like in Salesforce, how you can have relationships between objects, or in HubSpot, you can have associations. Our data models can be built on anything, on your CRM, on your databases, on your spreadsheets, APIs. So even if they're in separate systems, you can tell us these objects relate to one another if they do. In this case, they do, because I do have an organization ID on the left here coming from one product backend. In this case, this billing database has an organization ID as well. I'm going to set a relationship between the two. It's optional, but I can, so I shall. Organization ID here will map to that coming from our user details model, and click Save. Right, another data model, this time through custom SQL. Now, lastly, I've got a spreadsheet. Let's grab some data from there. And so we'll go to a spreadsheet with some sample mailing addresses. And we'll go to the one tab on the spreadsheet. From here, I'll grab the city and country and state. Again, optional join step. I will use it because we do have an email field coming from our users or product backend. We have an email field coming from the spreadsheet as well. So I'll set a relationship between the two just because I can, and click Save. Let's say this is enough for the sake of this demo so far, right? We've got 3 data models here, surfaced a bunch of fields. Now we can finish this first use case. We'll go to Model Syncs, we'll hit Create Sync. We'll walk through this wizard. So pick our destination system to be, let's say, Salesforce. And we can sync to any object, including custom ones, but let's pick Contact. That's a popular one people begin with. And then it's a question of picking sync mode. Now, either you update or create records in Salesforce, or only update existing ones in Salesforce. This is the enrichment use case, if you will, or only create new records in Salesforce, but don't update anything existing. People will often do this to create a brand new lead, for example, and then SalesOps takes over with editing it. I'll pick both for the sake of this demo. Now, the first thing to set with any sync is what we call an identity mapping. And so on the left-hand side, it's all these model fields we've just constructed. On the right-hand side, it's all the Salesforce fields, in this case, contact fields. All the identity mapping is a match field on both sides so that we know how to distinguish unique objects. Now, you can use whatever you want. Since we're syncing contacts, email address is probably a common one to use. And so we'll use that. Once we've mapped that, then one can go nuts and map whatever one wants from the models you've constructed. I can grab first name from our product backend into first name in Salesforce. Note that our Salesforce requires last name. And so this is a validation rule from our Salesforce that we're being warned about. And so let's satisfy that by moving last name into the last name field. Now, because we've joined in stuff from other places, I can grab city, which is coming from Google Sheets. And this is the benefit of setting relationships if you have them. I can pick city and map that to, let's say, mailing city in Salesforce. And really what we have here is fields coming from two separate systems in the same sync. So there's really less of a need to panic and centralize everything or be forced to. We can grab bits and pieces from your scattered systems as long as there's a relationship. And then not everyone knows SQL. So we have some point and click filtering for those who are more comfortable with that. So you can say things like, well, only sync records where B2B customers will actually do this sometimes, where email is, let's say, does not end with gmail.com, right? Sometimes B2B customers only want work email addresses in their systems. So you do get a rich set of filters for text, and then other ones for dates, and then other ones for numbers, and we'll show you the right set automatically. I won't set any here. And then you can click preview, where we'll run a live query and then show you some sample data to be synced. If your sample looks okay, you can dismiss this preview. Carry on to the last step, where you get to pick your sync frequency. Now, this could be manual, where someone has to click a button every time. Continuous, which is near real time. Anytime your sources change, we'll move the updates over. Or these other structured schedules as you see fit, hourly, daily, weekly, a custom schedule. Note, with all these options, we will automatically detect what's new or what's changed since the last sync and only move those records. So this isn't one of these dump situations where we're going to dump everything all the time. No matter what system you're syncing from, our sync engine will detect what's changed since the last time and only move those records, which saves you a lot on API calls, which is, of course, something the RevOps crowd cares about.
Yep.
In this case, I'll set this going on a continuous basis and continue. Verify a summary of your settings here. If your settings look good to you, then click Save in the top right. And that's it. Here we've created a sync from scratch, going from our product backend database and a spreadsheet into Salesforce. Now, one can run a test sync, which would sync 5 random records, but I'll just go ahead and enable this guy. And it's about to kick in, but instead of waiting for a few seconds, let's just force a kickoff. Click sync now. And then on the left, we got a couple of panes to look at, where we've got the history pane here, which simply shows a log of all syncs that are currently running, as well as ones that have finished in the past. Any errors or duplicate warnings will flag for you. You get to click a log and examine records. And then under error handling, you can toss in any email address or a Slack channel in the subscriber list here, and we'll automatically notify if anything fails. But that's it. This was a setup from scratch. We can see this initial sync was successful. At this point, you get to walk away and everything's automatically updating in your system of choice.
Yeah.
Now, any questions, Matt, so far?
No, I mean, I'm kind of amazed at how easy that's. I have a I have a war story myself of the actually the use case that you were describing earlier of getting free trials into Salesforce and trying to leverage a consultant and Segment to make that happen. And literally we're talking months of work and like back and forth and headache and thousands of dollars spent. And even then I wasn't able to get it done. And you basically like this, if this was around at the time, would have allowed me to accomplish that in sounds like probably less than an hour. So Yeah, so that's amazing. I was wondering, so you and I think you were showing some of this at the end, but so you kind of get these syncs set up. You talked about how you don't sync 100% of records every single
Mhm.
time. You only sync the things that are updated. But then yeah, I was curious about like errors or changes, like for example, like with spreadsheets, right? People are adding columns, deleting
Yep.
columns, like doing stuff all the time. Like if something does get broken or out of
Yep.
whack, what's the process to one, just make sure that like bad data doesn't wind up in the wrong spot. And then how do you make sure you get ahead of that before
Mhm.
anything bad does happen?
This is really where our error notifications come into play. We will detect this. We'll send an email, and then we will actually give you. So these numbers here are clickable. You can see a full set of records that we attempted to move over. If there were errors, which, fortunately or not, don't occur with this test sync, but if there were any, this would be a clickable number. You get to click on it and see a breakdown of every error for every record. And you'd get to download a CSV. Sometimes, data is just such a messy world. Sometimes really it's just a case of people need to edit some data at the sources and just resync it. In other cases, it's something more fundamental. Either way, you do get an alert and you get a full detailed log with a per record error.
Yeah. And what would be some error examples? Is it like if
Mm.
a field was set up as a uh like a number field and you were trying to push
Yep.
text, like I guess
So,
could there be multiple error types, and would
yep.
you help identify what those are? And
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, we'd classify all the types for you. So you'd get a summary of all the error types we've encountered, and then a per record breakdown. In terms of common errors, type errors are actually rare because our system is very generous with mismatched types. If you're moving a number field into a text field, we'll convert it automatically.
Hmm.
If you're moving a date field into a text field or vice versa, we'll convert it automatically. If you're doing something like a currency field into a date field, we're going to error on that and warn
Yeah.
you, going, this makes no sense.
Yeah.
So that's actually, type errors aren't common. Common errors really just tend to revolve around junky data. You do have things like, the founders in the early days flooded the database with a bunch of junk, just a user email field that's really not an email. It's just a bunch of crap.
Yeah.
And the RevOps person shows up going, well, I see users, I'm going to move them over to contacts in Salesforce. And it's that sort of egregious level, if you will, of error that's most common. And then
Yeah.
the other error tends to be just permission errors, right? You have maybe a more junior RevOps person who's not the admin, whose Salesforce account or the integration account they're using doesn't have the right permissions to write to certain fields. It's a question of just going into Salesforce and fixing that. But those tend to be the two most common ones.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, that makes sense. And so it sounds like this is a very easy way to get, again, things like product data from Postgres database
Yep.
into Salesforce, while also combining that with some Google Sheet data
Yep.
along the way.
I'd like to cover the use case where we dump stuff into the warehouse. This is the
Yeah.
classic ETL use case as well, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So this will be very quick. This happens in our bulk syncs tab. Clicking on that, we'll walk through a wizard again, and we'll begin by picking the source system. So in this case, we're dumping data into a Snowflake, a Google BigQuery, a Postgres SQL if you're a small company using a small warehouse. Snowflake, BigQuery tend to be most common. And again, let's pick classic Salesforce. We'll pick that as our source system here. And we'll pick our destination system to be Snowflake in this example. And then we'll give you all the objects from Salesforce. And it's really just a question. You could just select everything, in our case, 900 plus objects in one go. Or you could be a bit more discriminatory. Maybe you only want your accounts object, for example, to be synced over. So in this case, we'll just pick this guy here. And then we'll carry on. And sync frequency, again, in this case, we'll just have this happen, like, let's say on an hourly basis, at 30 minutes on the hour, hit continue. Again, summary of your settings, all looks okay, click save in the top right. And we'll warn you saying we're going to be creating a space on your warehouse to write data, fine enough. And then we'll go ahead and create, for those who are more versed in terminology, we'll create a schema in Snowflake in this case for your data. And again, you could run a test sync, which would sync 5 random records, or just enable this guy. And again, we'll just kick off a sync right now. But otherwise, it's a similar interface. As a sync's currently starting up, you get your classic sync history again, showing a full log. And again, there's an error handling section for emails or Slack channels to receive errors. The difference with the bulk sync use case is there are no data models. This is really just wholesale. I don't even care what fields are present, just dump them all. Now, you could be discriminatory and pick particular fields and exclude particular fields from your sources, but really people do tend to use this mode for, I've got a data warehouse, don't care what objects are in Salesforce or what fields, whether it's Salesforce, Zendesk, whatever your source is, just dump them all in there. Whereas when going the other way, we do need to curate fields because of course you can't just dump things wholesale in Salesforce and create fields on the go. You do have to be careful about mapping things. In warehouses, we'll create everything for you, the columns, the table names, and so on. But this is really your regular ETL use case covered in a minute. You know, we've got sync running, and that takes care of that bit.
Yeah, that's awesome. And is there a place in here that I can kind of see all of the, I don't know, all the different integrations, movements of data that I have set up? I'm just thinking of, you know, I don't know, is there ever a, like how, you know, how can I make sure that, you know, before I go in and maybe set up a new, like a new sync that, you know, it's nothing that I've created, you know, wholly or partially before?
Yeah, ultimately, it is just these sync pages here where you just get to see your full syncs, and you're clicking on any one of them immediately drops you into a configuration summary. And so you can hover over the fields, see exactly where they're coming from and what systems they're coming from, and see fields they're being synced to.
Yeah.
And so that's how you can tell. There are littered throughout this, it's worth mentioning, for the RevOps crowd, there are some conveniences littered about, which other vendors tend to overlook. For example, when syncing data to Salesforce, if I click Show Field Details here, you actually get to override a sync mode on a per field basis. And so, for example, maybe you're syncing stuff to Salesforce, but you only want to write to a field if it's empty. Otherwise, you want to leave it alone because then it's the humans who take over editing it. You can actually do this, and people often will do this with names of contacts, for example. If I click this guy, I can, for the last name field, pick the do not overwrite existing option, which means we will only write data if the field in Salesforce is empty. Otherwise, we'll leave it alone.
Yeah.
So little convenience, again, for the RevOps crowd. Other conveniences, well, if we go to connections, you know, API call limits are such an issue for people. If we click on Salesforce here, so we will surface the number of API calls we've used in the last 24 hours. Now, in the world of a million SaaS tools all integrating with Salesforce, this ends up being pretty crucial if something goes wrong. You do get to see how much we're contributing. Now, behind the scenes, we will actually never bring your Salesforce down because we will allocate a limit for our own selves. We'll look at how many API calls you have available. We'll allocate a limit that's below the max and just respect it. And we'll simply scale back if we're getting close to it and then resume when we have more allocations. For the real OCD crowd, if you click on the Salesforce connection, you can actually check this enforce API limits box and give us your own API call limit to respect. About 1% of customers uses this feature, usually large enterprises where people are very OCD about this. It's like, well, I don't even want you to respect my limits. I want you to respect the limits I will provide to you.
Yeah. They've those are probably the folks that have been burned. I know I've been burned in the past. All of a sudden you get that surprise bill from Salesforce and you're like, oh my dear goodness, what happened? And then you go and you look and you realize like some random integration you had like kind of went wild, right? And you pay the price and and then you just cross your fingers that it doesn't happen again. So this is a great way to avoid.
Yep. You just force us to, again, adhere to whatever you impose. If you don't check this, again, we will just have our own estimation and block our own selves with our own allocation. But again, if you really wanted us to respect an exact number, you can toss this in here. couple of other conveniences for the RevOps crowd. Now, we do have a query runner tab here that's worth covering. Let's discard these changes. Now, all this is a query client, a SQL client embedded in here. And so any databases we're connected to, you can click on and sort of examine their layouts of data, their schemas, if you will, and you can write whatever query you want within our tool just to really get a feel for your data, right? Maybe you want to set up a sink and you're not sure about the data you're working with. So for those who know SQL, you can just run queries here and then just get a preview of the results. You can create a data model from these to then sync to other places or export to CSV and do whatever you want with the data. So if we're connected to your product database, your warehouse, you don't really need to ask engineering for SQL client credentials and so on. Connection set up, you can hop in here and examine your data. Now, for the RevOps crowd in particular, you actually get to connect to Salesforce and run SOQL queries against your Salesforce instance. Now, not everyone uses SOQL, but it can be quite handy for the more power users. And this is a real-time connection. This isn't, oh, I'm querying the warehouse and the warehouse is delayed by 4 hours from real Salesforce. You can write whatever SOQL queries you want in here and run them. We'll run them against Salesforce. In this case, we have a silly query. We're just selecting emails, but you get the point. It's really just go nuts here. And then you can create a data model from this and actually sync that anywhere you want. And so we can click create model here. And in this case, you only have one field, but you could imagine a query involving many fields. Check them off, click save. Let's call this example SOQL as a data model. Click save. And then you have a SOQL model. It's just a list of fields. You can sync it to Salesforce. You can sync it to other tools, into spreadsheets, or as you see fit. And it's all guaranteed to be real time at time of sync.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, like I said, so many I know so many of my prior headaches on the RevOps side have just been, like you said, figuring out how to move data back and forth. And I think the most frustrating part is knowing what you want to accomplish and why, but not having the call it like the technical expertise and the permissions and all that stuff you need to do it right, to make it happen. Like you said, I don't necessarily know, nor do I really care the technical differences between moving something one way versus the other. I just want it moved. So something like this, just point and click, is fantastic. And then I know tons of RevOps folks out there who know SQL and are kind of those power data users, and they get tons of value from something like this as well.
Yep, exactly. There's one more crazy feature I'll illustrate. This is a new feature. We haven't actually announced it, so this is actually the first time I'm demoing it to non-customers, but we also have the ability to run SQL against anything without it being put in a warehouse first. Now, for example, let's go to our trusty Salesforce connection here. Now, this is something we call Polytomic Lightning. And what you do is you can, as we're loading objects from Salesforce here. Oh, you know what? Yeah, okay. So we've loaded objects from Salesforce. Now you can tell us what objects to expose to Lightning. In this case, we picked accounts and contacts. Now we've done something similar for Stripe data, for example. As we wait to load some Stripe data, we've picked customers and invoices. What does exposing to Lightning mean? It means I can go into Query Runner, pick a Polytomic Lightning connection that's pre-built in there. What I have here is a bunch of data from HubSpot, spreadsheet, Salesforce, Stripe, and I can now start running SQL. Here's a SQL query that combines data from different sources on the left, and I can just run it. And what I'll get back is just regular SQL results. Nothing had to be moved to a data warehouse. Now you can then create a data model, sync that wherever you want. And RevOps crowd.
This essentially, I mean, you're basically you're eliminating the need for a data warehouse for any of these.
If you have huge, let's say hundreds of millions of records, which very few B2B SaaS companies do, then sure, we can point and click, transfer your stuff to a warehouse. But some of the sophisticated SQL savvy RevOps people have gravitated towards this because they go, well, I'll run a SQL query against my data, move it into a spreadsheet or into Salesforce or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't want to wait for my data team to set up a new sink into the warehouse before I can run my SQL query.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm ready to go. All I need is the SQL. I don't really care that this needs to go into the warehouse. And in fact, that just annoys me. Let's have to wait for hours.
Yeah.
And using Lightning, the data is guaranteed real-time fresh at moment of sync. And so we have RevOps people doing things like commission calculations, for example, that are just true to the minute in Salesforce because they're running their complex SQL queries off Salesforce data using Lightning.
Yeah.
It's a warehouse.
Those connections stay updated as well.
Pardon?
And then the queries and the connections,
Yep.
connections
You
stay
can, exactly. When you set up a sync, our guarantee is at moment of sync, we're going to reflect the real-time view of the world. So you can have something going every 5 minutes, and it's really that. You can do every 5 minutes from a warehouse, but the data moving into the warehouse may move every 6 hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is sort of, it's a small set of people who really value this kind of thing where you go, look, there is some stuff I really don't want to have to talk to my data team and wait for them to set up these pipes and so on, because sometimes the data team controls the warehouse and it's not the RevOps people. So
Yeah.
this their escape hatch here.
Yeah. And I could see this, like you said, maybe you start with one use case or one particular
Exactly. Yep.
in mind, and then I'm sure from there you're probably like, oh, and then actually like this thing and that thing and this other
Exactly.
thing. Just so
It's such a crazy concept to RevOps people go. They, as one of them said, I haven't even thought this could ever be possible. So I haven't thought of use cases.
Yeah.
And then a week later, right, we're faced with 12 different use cases. Yep. Because everyone has adopted the concept of I need to rely on engineering and I need to rely on my data team to surface data for me. And this is the way I always joke. I used to be the data guy serving RevOps people. And I would always tell them, I have no time for you. This is not a high priority. And now I always joke, I'm paying penance through this company to free the RevOps people from the shackles of their engineering and data teams.
Yeah, that's right. So they never have to interact with folks like you on the other end again, right?
Exactly. That's really, it's exactly that. They can request features from us, we'll build them and so on. But the goal is, here's your control box. The paradox that's in the world right now is the RevOps people know their data the best. The data people do not really understand RevOps data.
Yeah.
No data person lives in Salesforce or NetSuite or Stripe or whatever. They know the technicalities of data storage and querying, but they don't understand the data. So you're in this weird situation where the person who understands the data best is gate kept by other people who don't understand the data best for technical reasons. Technical reasons, all this means is we can invent technology to make those moot.
Exactly. Yeah. That's awesome. And this is very very incredible, kind of powerful product. And so
you can build these data models on anything. You can build them on your other systems, build one on Stripe, sync Stripe data anywhere, build one on Zendesk, move that anywhere, and so on.
Yeah. That's awesome. And so on the I guess the product side for folks out there who want to give this thing a try, do you have a kind of free trial, self-serve version of the product?
We do offer free trials. It's not self-serve yet, and it's only because we're dealing with so many customers that it's just on the roadmap. But for now, go into our website and just click the See Demo button, book your 15-minute call, and we can activate a trial for you.
That's awesome. And then I know we talked a little bit about kind of customers and use cases before. Integrations, it sounds like, I mean, I guess rather than asking what integrations you have, are there any ones that might be popular with folks in RevOps that you're currently working on or don't offer through the product right now?
SalesLoft is one that's up and coming. That's quite popular with the RevOps crowd. More generally on integrations, we actually have a unique model. We don't build integrations unless customers request them. So we have some sophisticated internal tooling that lets us turn things around within the span of a week.
Okay.
And this is something that's available to all customers. There's no extra fee for the service. It's just we have a hole in our engineering roadmap that just receives integration requests.
Yeah.
Any customer who wants something can get something in a week.
Okay, that's great. And then you mentioned kind of a free trial is also available. It sounds like once you get access to the tool or the solution, you can start to use it immediately, right? So there's really no implementation time. And then
Not
is there
really.
yeah, is there anything you can share on like either kind of pricing or cost,
Yep.
like you guys charge, things like that?
Yeah, it just depends on what size company you are. But for everyone, the pricing goes up on one variable, which is the number of integrations. There are no limits on data, there are no limits on users or number of fields and so on. And so
Yeah.
typically at a base level, we'll begin with 7 to 14K per year. And there's a variance there can be for security requirements. So we actually have an option. If your security team says nothing external is allowed to connect to our databases, we have what we call an on-premise option where we can turnkey run the deployments in your private cloud, so we see nothing. That sort of stuff can drive the base platform up. But otherwise, it's just that, and then it just goes up per the number of integrations and the request. So very straightforward pricing model. No one needs to sit there scratching their heads going, am I going to exceed some volume allotment next month or anything of the kind?
Yeah, that's awesome. And then any I guess I know we talked about the wide range of customers before. We didn't talk about any specific customers you have, but maybe do you have any happy customers you can publicly share?
Yeah, sure. It's really sort of the ones, some of the ones listed on our website. Those who may know Brex or Mercury Bank, if you're a B2B SaaS startup, you probably bank with both. Both are customers. Companies like Retool, which lots of people use to build internal tooling. The ROAS team, very, very heavy users of ours. Customers like Vanta, which everyone uses for SOC 2 compliance, also RevOps team's a customer, and so on.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and a good lineup of folks too. So well, Gal, this is great. Product tool looks amazing, incredible. Like I said, you would have saved me probably months of time in my prior role, a whole bunch of headache and dollars too. So thanks for the walkthrough, my friend. And yeah, awesome job building a great tool and a great product for folks in RevOps. So so with that, anyone watching that wants to check them out, polytomic.com, definitely go give them a try, book the 10-minute call to get access to the free trial, start playing around with things. My guess is you'll be very, very, very pleased with what you see. But with that, Galb, I'll let you run, my friend. For everyone who's watching, thank you for this as well. And until next time, I'll see y'all later.
Thanks, it's been a pleasure. Thanks.